This episode offers psychosocial education designed to inspire and motivate our listeners. The information provided does not constitute a therapeutic relationship nor a substitute for professional mental health care. If you are experiencing a mental health crisis, call 911, go to your nearest emergency room, or for listeners in the United States, text 988 for the National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Warning, this episode contains brain food that will lead to improved emotional and social intelligence. Thanks for tuning in to Harvesting Happiness today for a healthy serving of consciously prepared brain food. This is Lisa Cypers Kamen, your host. Since 2010, we've been broadcasting sound ideas for better well-being. Each week, we spotlight diverse thinkers and doers who are contemporary trendsetters and change agents, devoting their lives to creating a better world. I invite you to listen and change how you think about human happiness. Our award-winning content is fresh, optimistic, and purpose-driven media that promotes well-being from the inside out. This episode is part of the Good Citizens Election Season Survival Guide to Restoring Common Sense and Sanity in a Crazy World, produced in collaboration with renowned, fair-minded subject matter experts who provide strategies that enhance critical thinking, increase civic engagement, and foster healthy pleasure to boost personal well-being and relationship satisfaction. You can also discover more unique bonus content at More Mental Fitness by Harvesting Happiness on Substack and Medium. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. Thanks for joining me on today's show, where we are exploring food for thought, nutrition for mental health and stress management, with my guest, Dr. Sarah Ballantyne. She is the New York Times bestselling author of Nutrivore, the radical new science of getting the nutrients you need from the food you eat. She creates educational resources to help people improve their diet and lifestyle choices, empowered and informed by the most current evidence-based scientific research. With Nutrivore, Dr. Sarah has created a positive and inclusive approach to dietary guidance based on science and devoid of dogma, using nutrient density and sufficiency as its basic principles. Nourishment, not judgment. Sarah, I am so excited to have you back and to tell us how we can feed ourselves during these times of uncertainty.
I am so excited to be back. And I think this is such an important topic because it covers there's two different sides to the same coin. So one is the actual nutrients that our brains need to make neurotransmitters, the actual nutrients that help regulate the stress response. So there's a physiological piece to this. What are the foods that supply those nutrients? But there's a psychological piece to it as well, which is how to let go of the stress of, am I making a good food choice or a bad food choice? And I'm putting air quotes around good and bad there, because I would argue there's no such thing. I would argue that all food provides us with one or more of three things: energy, which our bodies need to fuel all of the chemical reactions of life; nutrients, the raw materials for all of those chemical reactions, the building blocks that makes us us; and experience, joy, texture, family bonding, maybe sometimes stress relief. And I think it's okay to intentionally make room in our diets for foods that supply maybe energy and not a lot of nutrients, but lots of joy, lots of experience, lots of comfort. And I think that when we can intentionally make room for those foods, we're honoring something that's really unique to the human experience, that we celebrate with food, we mourn with food, we bond with others with food, we mark milestones with food, we nurture both ourselves and our loved ones with food. And that is one of the things that makes us us. It is okay to not fight human nature with every diet choice.
And we soothe with food. So for
Yes.
those of us who are ice cream loving, cookie consuming, potato chip crunching, carb loving human beings managing stress, this is kind of normal, is what I'm hearing you say.
There was this really fascinating study done, 15 years ago, maybe, It was a rodent study, and I won't go into too much of the details because I think when we got into the details, the study suddenly becomes like a little bit disconcerting rather than I'd like us to focus on the very interesting results that it tells us. But what they measured was how diet impacts the stress response. So they created us some stressful situations for these mice, and then they measured things like cortisol as well as behaviors that mice have to when they demonstrate stress. So one of the things mice will do is they'll start pulling out their fur. That's called barbering. So we'll measure, right, how stressed are these mice behaving? Some of these mice had access to just their regular healthy diet, right? Their regular mouse chow. And some of them had access to energy dense food, high fat, high carbohydrate, high sugar food. And what's
Mm.
fascinating about this study is that the mice that had access to this high energy density food, the same types of foods that we crave when we're stressed, were protected from the behavioral and physiological responses to the stress. So they were
Wow.
showing less stress related behavior. Their markers of stress were lower. And it is just one piece of this like understanding of mammalian biology that we're getting that we crave energy. It protects us, at least over the short term. Ideally, we would manage our stress. We're not doing this every single day for years, right? But over the short term, it's actually protective. That instinct to crave energy dense foods has a purpose.
Wow. That is very interesting. So, like, just to paraphrase this, you're saying these mice were exposed to stressors. The group that just ate their normal diet, air quoted healthy diet, versus the ones that went for the naughty foods that we're not supposed to call naughty, judgment free zone, but went for the things that
Yes.
that would satisfy them more quickly, actually had lower cortisol as a result of eating it
Yes.
because
Yes.
they were satisfying the craving, which lowered their stress level. Is that the idea?
If you I think it's probably even more deeply physiological than that. I think having energy for the stress response for right, remember the stress response is there to protect us, right?
Yes.
Our fight or flight system exists to shift where energy is being used, to shift where blood flow is, to shift where our immune system is in our body, to prioritize the systems that are needed for survival and deprioritize the systems that are only going to be relevant if we survive the current situation, right? So our fight or flight system is there so that we can run away really quickly from the lion and heal any scratches that we might have gotten in as we scrambled up a tree to get away from. I don't know if lions can climb trees, so this analogy is running away from you a little bit, but it's there so that we can prioritize, right, survival in that moment. In that moment we don't need to be digesting our food. In that moment we don't need reproductive health, right? In that
We need energy.
moment
Energy.
we need energy. Our
Yeah.
immune system actually moves more into our periphery, into our skin, than it is sort of like normally a little bit more evenly distributed throughout our bodies. We have more immune cells in our skin getting ready for wound healing.
Okay, Dr. Sarah, I've got a geek question here.
Yeah.
So when we are in stress, when we are in anxiety, does the body burn faster than not, than in a calm state?
I don't actually know the answer to that question. I know that the way that we use energy shifts, but I don't know if our total energy usage is higher or not.
Next study. Because
Yes.
that would be
Well,
interesting.
someone else might know the
Yeah,
answer to that question. It's just not
yeah.
in my knowledge base.
You would say, like, excuse me, I get 500 more calories today because I'm working hard on my stress, you know?
I actually, whoever does know the answers to that question, I hope they comment and let us know
That would be amazing.
I'm hoping that is true.
I mean, I don't know, but I mean, we some of us are not as hungry when we're in stress too, which is not a good
Yes.
thing, right? That we will release weight during stress, but we're also not feeding ourselves what we need.
And I am the opposite. I am a person whose appetite goes on overdrive when I'm stressed. And it's fascinating to me how we have these like different, it's almost how different brains kind of interpret the same signals, right?
Yeah.
So I have this like slightly upset stomach. One person might interpret that as I'm not hungry, I don't want to eat, and another person, me, might interpret that as, ooh, yeah, I'm hungry, and I have to feed this hunger. It's just a fascinating sort of the same system causing such opposite behaviors in different people. And I actually find, from just as my own experience, is that if I'm angry stressed, my appetite is suppressed, and all other types of stress, my appetite is increased. So if I'm pissed, I
Yo,
don't want
well,
to
look
eat.
out. Look out.
but every other form of stress, it's like, yes, I'm craving those high energy density foods.
This is fascinating stuff. I want to ask about your tips for supporting our bodies when we are going through stress, whether it is election cycle stress or everyday stress. If we're not feeding ourselves well, we're not utilizing those calories well, and we feel it. It affects our physical
Yes.
health. So, could you like just remind us of the things that would be good to do?
Yeah, this is why I love focusing on what we can add to our diets that supply those really important nutrients that these systems need to help regulate the stress response, rather than focusing on restriction. Like, we can make room for the foods we're craving, but also focus on adding more. There's a couple of nutrients that are so important for the stress response. Vitamin C is probably the most important. It's important for,
Wow.
we need it to make serotonin and dopamine. We also need it to make catecholamines like cortisol, adrenaline, and noradrenaline, which are released from our adrenal glands during the stress response. But vitamin C also controls how sensitive our receptors are to catecholamines and makes them, so it binds with those receptors and makes them more sensitive. So when we have enough vitamin C in our system, we respond to the stress more proportionally, as opposed to starting to become resistant. So our body has to make more and more of these chemicals. So we use up vitamin C when we're stressed because we need it to make all these stress hormones. But vitamin C also controls the stress response. So we actually
Ooh.
have a huge collection of studies. There's this fascinating study done, gosh, like 20 years ago now, where they gave people, I think it was 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C twice a day, if I remember correctly, for 2 weeks. And then they had some of them do mental arithmetic. So let me just give you a bunch of numbers and see what you can make of them. And they had some of the other study participants do public speaking, and they measured their cortisol secretion, their blood pressure, and then also their perceived stress. And compared to the placebo, the study participants who had vitamin C had substantially lower stress responses. And there's been a bunch of like similar studies done since, showing that vitamin C is one of the most important nutrients for lowering our risk of anxiety and depression and other stress related
Wow.
disorders.
Wow. And we get it from a few simple sources, right? The sun,
Fruits and
yeah,
vegetables
citrus
generally.
fruits,
Yeah.
yeah. And so like I'm thinking instead of supplementing, right? Because you're saying that we can
Yes.
get what we need through our food.
That's
That
always
we
preferable.
always preferable. We think about the relationship of how to get more vitamin C in our lives. And because I'm feeling a little bit cheeky, I go, okay, well, maybe that means that we need to add some citrus to our happy hour beverages. Like a citrus rich sangria or,
Yes,
an
that
Aperol
is
spritz
definitely
with
one
extra
option.
orange slices.
I think so. What's cool about citrus fruits is the polyphenols in citrus fruit actually increase the bioavailability of the vitamin C. And that's why citrus is such a great source of vitamin C. We actually use the vitamin C in it a little bit more easily because of these other nutrients that are also great antioxidants, like also good, but they're not our highest sources of vitamin C. So we actually get more vitamin C from like bell peppers, from broccoli. A lot of leafy greens are really good sources of vitamin C. So also like orange slices in a salad, maybe with some
Yes.
chicken for the vitamin B6, because vitamin B6 is another nutrient that has been shown to reduce anxiety and depression risk. Vitamin B6 is also a really important nutrient for making serotonin, dopamine, GABA, melatonin. And there's a bunch of studies showing that increasing vitamin B6 intake can lower risks of depression, anxiety, as well as insomnia, because it also supports those
Wow.
neurotransmitters that are important for sleep. So I would say, yeah, a chicken salad with some orange wedges in it. Doesn't that sound good right now?
It sounds fantastic. And I'm going to the sort of Asian chicken salad
Mhm.
department in my mind, right?
Yes.
With some
Yes,
sesame
absolutely.
and tamari and ginger.
Yeah. Maybe a little
Ginger
bit of
probably.
edamame. Yeah. Sounds
Yes.
delicious.
And what does ginger do for us?
So ginger is has some really cool, very unique phytonutrients. But one of the coolest things about ginger is that it's been shown in so many different circumstances to basically ease gastrointestinal symptoms. So it's called gingerol because we name phytonutrients after the food we find it in the first time, and it can reduce nausea in chemotherapy patients, in morning sickness, in stomach flus, but it can also reduce farther down the spectrum,
Mm-hmm.
both extremes. It can reduce the exit problems of the digestive tract, um,
Oh,
and it can reduce cramping. So, one of ginger is such a wonderful thing to have around if you're somebody who gets an upset stomach when you're stressed.
boom! There it is in the dressing.
Yes,
Right. So we're
yes,
we're building the stress relieving concoction, this fabulous salad
yep,
that will help ease our suffering. And this is the idea. This is what is the beauty of Nutrivore, and what you've written about is that we can be super creative, take better care of ourselves, and keep ourselves healthier. It's great.
yes, with all without restricting, right?
Oh,
Focusing on
yes,
the
yes.
important nutrient dense foods to add to supply our body with all of the nutrients it needs to function the way it's supposed to, without engaging in that restrictive mindset that makes us feel like we're deprived, like we're missing our favorite food, that it creates obsession and fixation and magnifies cravings, leads to emotional eating, leads to the yo-yo diet, right?
No,
Leads to
not
weight
no dieting.
cycling.
We're in a no
So we
no
get
no diet zone.
yes, so we get to get completely away from that, I think, really harmful psychology, and just focus on adding more foods that supply our bodies with nutrients, but with no food off the table.
Let's take a break. And when we come back, we will continue the conversation with Dr. Sarah Ballantyne. We're talking about her book, Nutrivore, The Radical New Science of Getting the Nutrients You Need. To learn more, connect with Sarah over at Nutrivore.com, on X at Dr. Sarah Ballantyne. And it's the same for Facebook and Instagram. We'll be right back and we will continue the conversation about how to survive our stress by eating well. This month is Menopause Aware Month, which is something that's not talked about nearly as much as it should be, considering that millions of women reach menopause each year. We owe it to one another to open up the conversation. From my own lived experience, menopause affected many aspects of my being, from body temperature to mood and stress response to the shedding thickness and quality of my hair. Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement brand, trusted by over 1 million people. 51% of women who have gone through menopause have experienced hair thinning. That's why Nutrafol created their Women's Balance supplement designed specifically for women 45 plus experiencing hair thinning that can be impacted by hormonal shifts, natural aging, and metabolism changes. Nutrafol is the first and only hair growth supplement with published clinical studies on menopausal women. In a clinical study, 93% of women reported that their hair looked and felt healthier after using Nutrafol for 6 months. I have been religiously using Nutrafol for more than 2 years, and thanks to Nutrafol, shedding has been significantly reduced and my hair is now thicker and healthier. Some remarkable bonus side benefits include better sleep, improved stress response, and significantly reduced pesky menopause symptoms, including hot flashes. No matter your lifestyle or stage of life, from postpartum to menopause, Nutrafol is an excellent solution that targets the root causes of thinning and supports hair growth from within. Start loving your hair again. With Nutrivore, you'll see and feel thicker hair volume, fuller scalp coverage, and reduced shedding in 3 to 6 months. For a limited time, Nutrivore is offering our listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrivore.com and enter the promo code HH. Find out why over 4,500 healthcare professionals and stylists recommend Nutrivore for healthier hair. Nutrivore, spelled Nutrafol.com, promo code HH. That's Nutrafol.com, promo code HH. Now let's take that break. We'll be right back. Harvesting Happiness is rooted in science. Our work facilitates applied positive psychology practices through media and consulting. We're committed to sound ideas for better well-being, leading to increased life satisfaction and a better world for everyone. We're not into pseudoscience or quick fixes. We're focused on common sense backed by rigorous research. Healthy critical thinking is the foundation for our discussions. We encourage you to challenge preconceptions and explore ideas with a curiously discerning mind. Collaboration with our guests is united by an inclusive vision to boost resilience, critical thinking, communication, and problem solving through civilized discourse and pleasurable relational engagement for everyone. Each day, we have the intellectual freedom to be happy or the liberty to be miserable, regardless of external circumstances. If you or someone you know is struggling with mental health, please seek support because good psychological health is vital to the achievement of a healthy and satisfying life. Visit harvestinghappiness.com for psychosocial and educational services that boost emotional and social intelligence. And we're back. Let's rejoin my conversation with Dr. Sarah Ballantyne. We're exploring food for thought, nutrition for mental health, and stress management. Let's get back to it. And we're talking about how to soothe ourselves this election season by making good food choices with nothing being off the table. Dr. Sarah is telling us, you want that ice cream, you go get that ice cream. And at the same time, to make sure that what we do eat is nutrient rich, right? I mean, that's the message.
I love the idea of giving ourselves permission to have that ice cream. No guilt, no blame, no regretting
shame,
that
no
decision
food
later,
shame.
right?
Yeah.
No shame. But also, maybe we eat it first. We don't have to have dessert after a meal. Go ahead.
No, we
if that's
don't.
the thing you really want, have it first and then follow it up with that delicious, Asian citrus chicken salad with all of the nutrients that are what our body, is also craving, right? We're craving the food for comfort, but we're still also craving those nutrients. So making sure we're supplying both, even if the initial feeling is, I just want the ice cream, like recognizing there's this deeper feeling underneath that is like, I also need all of that vitamin B6 and vitamin C and the protein and the omega-3 fats and all of these things that are really important for our brains to make neurotransmitters and to all of our brain cells to communicate properly with each other and communicate with the rest of the body. All of that comes from nutrients.
You mentioned omega, and I would like to talk about the omega-3s because recently in the news, there have been studies that have been revealed about omega-3 not necessarily being as good for the heart as it once has been thought to be. And I was wondering, this is random and probably not completely on the theme, but so many of us supplement with omega-3s.
So I think there's this like old way of thinking about omega-6s and omega-3s that science from the last 5 years shows really isn't what's going on. So we used to kind of think of it as this ratio that was really important. So if we have this much omega-6, we need to have this much omega-3 to sort of roughly balance it out. And what newer science is showing is that it's really better to think of these as two essential nutrients that each have a daily value. And we want to make sure that we're hitting the daily value of omega-6 fats and omega-3 fats, that it doesn't super matter if they're plant-based omega-3 fats versus the longer chain omega-3s that we get from seafood. Although we still want to get at least some of those longer chain omega-3s in the mix, but like they're all pretty good. And that we want to just think of it like any other nutrient, right? That there's a recommended dietary allowance for my specific demographic. and I want to be making sure I'm getting enough. With omega-3s, it's like 1.5 to 2 grams per day, between both sort of like the alpha linolenic acid, the plant-based omega-3 that we get in flax seeds, chia seeds, walnuts, as well as the long chain omega-3s that we get from seafood or like sea vegetables or algae are also good sources. And with omega-6s, whether that's nuts or seeds or meat or vegetable oils, we want to be getting more like 12 to 18 grams per day. And that is what is required to actually best regulate our immune systems, best support our cardiovascular health, and best support our neurological health.
Once again, all attainable through the foods we eat.
Yes.
Yes. I mean,
Yes.
this is the beauty, I think, of this discussion, because we don't have to seek outside of our refrigerators. We make good choices when we go to the grocery store, or what if we're fortunate enough to have a garden that we grow,
Yeah.
It's so cool. Let's talk a little bit about going back to the immune system for a second, because when we are in stress, as so many of us are during this period of time, the immune system can become compromised.
Yes. That is the effect of both cortisol and corticotropin releasing hormones. So things that are released during the stress response. It suppresses certain aspects of the immune system and then makes other aspects kind of go on overdrive. Overall, that increases our susceptibility to colds and flu and other infections, right? Because our immune system's just not quite regulating itself the way it's supposed to. So part of getting that immune system regulation back is making sure that we're giving our immune system the nutrients it needs. Our immune system's kind of a big nutrient hog. Like, it uses up nutrient resources
Yes.
in a fairly unfair way compared to other biological systems. And it's hard to say there's a nutrient it doesn't need. But some biggies are vitamin A, vitamin D, making sure vitamin D levels are normal. Pretty much all of the B vitamins, because every cell needs that for energy. Zinc is a really important nutrient for immune function. And then making sure that we're doing what we can to increase resilience. So this has nothing, well, okay, getting enough vitamin C can increase resilience, and getting enough omega-3s can increase resilience. But when we talk about resilience, we're talking about making the physiological response in our bodies to a psychological stressor, making that response more measured. That's what resilience is. In practice, it feels like I'm stuck in traffic and it's cool, right? That's fine. I don't need to get angry.
Oh,
I
right.
don't need to start yelling at people, right? In practice, resilience looks like the wheels don't fall off the cart every time
Yeah.
something unexpected happens. But resilience is also there are personality traits that make some people more resilient than others naturally. But we can develop resilience by making time for play and fun, having some time in nature, getting some kind of activity in the day, by getting enough sleep. Getting enough sleep increases
Yes.
resilience.
Sleep
And
is
there's
so
some really
good.
good studies looking at mindfulness practice. And mindfulness practice can take a lot of different forms. They all seem to increase resilience. So there's lots of other sort of practices that we can incorporate in our days to increase resilience, which basically means that when we do get stuck in traffic when we're already late for work, our cortisol release in response to that stress is just not quite as high. It's more measured.
And what about, recognizing the upside of the downside? In the sense that when we have a negative event, or we're triggered by something that we see or hear in the news, to sort of perspective take on that event. Like, what is this? How does this really affect me? Yes, I'm going to be unhappy if this happens or that happens. But in this moment, I am okay. In this moment, my family is okay. Like, does that help?
Yeah, that's very much a mindfulness type approach, right? So it's very much, it would be called noting, maybe, right? So where you're very much, looking, you're sort of taking yourself out, your emotional self out of the situation, but you are recognizing the emotions that you have and you're honoring them, while also, looking at the situation and sort of taking it into its various pieces and making observations in terms of how that affects you. That would be very much right. This is why sort of I said mindfulness kind of takes a lot of forms. It's
Yes.
not all, sort of yoga class, body scan
Contemplating our
meditations,
navels.
right? It's not all sort of headspace,
Yeah.
meditations, right? And if those things work for you, that's fantastic. But a lot of people get very antsy in sort of meditative practice. So there are mindfulness strategies, and I'm not an expert in mindfulness. I'm a user, right? I'm a person who has found it very helpful in my own life. And my mother has actually a bunch of certifications in mindfulness. So my mother is the expert. So I'm
Ooh.
basically sharing what my mom has shared with me. But there's a lot of mindfulness strategies that are very much about responding, not reacting to the world, and sort of learning different ways of doing that.
So here's a thought experiment. Picture this for a moment. You had a bad day and you really want to reach for that ice cream. I'm using one of my favorite go-to soothers and savoring each bite of that ice cream and counting off the things for which we are grateful, or how things could have gone a different way, but we are just savoring them, that this worked positively. I mean, that you can use lots of different methods, and it's going back to your nothing is off limits kind of thing.
Yeah, I love that. I love that, incorporating gratitude practice with you called it self-soothing, but in this kind of context, I almost feel as though it's self-nurturing,
Yeah.
right?
Well, that
It
too.
is, it is, it is when we give ourselves permission to eat that food that we maybe used to think of as off the table, right? We
Yes.
used to think of that as a bad food, that I was weak. I didn't have enough willpower if I was eating that food. That's not what it is. It was never about discipline or willpower. That was never what it was. It's the fact that, these foods do still serve a purpose, even if the nutrients they contain are kind of meh. It's
Yeah.
okay. They can still fit into a healthy diet. I often do this sort of thought experiment when I'm trying to explain the Nutrivore philosophy to people, where I say, let's say you had this like super veggie, hash for breakfast. You have a chicken, Greek salad for lunch. You have salmon with a bunch of, 6 different roasted vegetables for dinner,
Ooh.
right? Like this diet that most people could agree is just going to be so packed with nutrients. It's all of the foods that are associated with lower risk of health problems in the future. Let's say you have, an ounce of nuts and seeds with sliced apple, right? Apple and nut butter for a snack in there. That is such a nutrient dense diet, right? Like anyone eating that is going to be proud, right? Like, oh, so
Perfect
great.
food day.
Now, let's say you then followed it up with a decadent slice of chocolate cake. Did that in any way take away from the nutrients and all those nutrient
No.
dense foods that you ate throughout the day? No, of course not. But it probably made you feel so happy. You got so much joy from your diet that you're happy to do that again tomorrow. And that's what Nutrivore
Yes.
is about, right? That's why we want to take a permissive approach to nourishing ourselves rather than a restrictive one, because it doesn't matter how healthy your diet is. If you're not getting joy from your diet, you're not going to be able to stick to it. So we need to intentionally include these self-soothing foods, these self-nourishing foods, these foods that nourish our souls, if not necessarily ourselves, in order to make those overall healthy eating patterns something we can stick to, so that we can navigate all of the different curveballs life throws at us.
Sarah, thanks for being here today. And I want to send our listeners over to Nutrivore.com to learn more about your work. At the book, Nutrivore, The Radical New Science for Getting the Nutrients You Need. You can find Dr. Sarah Ballantyne on X, Facebook, and Instagram at Dr. Sarah Ballantyne. As always, a huge pleasure, great fun, and thanks for giving us tips for how to manage our stress, our mental health, our physical health, and keep our bellies happy and full.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this lovely conversation.
Thanks for joining us today on Harvesting Happiness. This is Lisa Cypers Kamen on behalf of my guest, Dr. Sarah Ballantyne, wishing you kind thoughts, kinder words, and the kindest of actions. Until next time, remember, happiness is an inside job. Happiness is your inside job. Please go out and rock your day. Remember to be kind to one another. And don't forget to register and vote. Want to explore more sound ideas for better well-being? You can listen to part 2 of this conversation and the Good Citizens Election Season Survival Guide to Restoring Common Sense and Sanity in a Crazy World at More Mental Fitness by Harvesting Happiness on Substack and Medium. Subscribe, listen, and share hundreds of downloadable episodes wherever you get your podcasts. Connect with and follow us on most social media channels. To learn more about lifestyle management and mental fitness consulting services, please visit harvestinghappiness.com. Harvesting Happiness and More Mental Fitness are produced by Lisa Cypers Kamen, Andrea Mengele, Robin Boyd, Andrea Daly, and the excellent team at Podfly Productions, including Eric Begay, Kimberly Beck, and Alec Guess, in collaboration with TogiNet Radio, KBUU, RadioMalibu.net, and is available on PRX, the Public Radio Exchange.